Welcome. Hi, everybody. It's really glad to have you all here joining us through this webinar. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. If we haven't met before, I'm Becky Thompson, she, her pronouns, and I serve in the role of Director of Student Financial Assistance at the Washington Student Achievement Council. And presenting with me today, and you'll hear from them later, is Carly Curley and Gabrielle Matul-Wurst, and holding down the question and answer, moderating and helping facilitate Carla Idle Corwin and Marla Skelly. So I just want to give them a quick shout out and for their work today. So as you all know, we did a version, this 3 locations last week in Tacoma, in Spokane, and in Yakima, but also wanted to kind of make sure that we were giving an electronic option here, kind of taking the best in both worlds of like pre-pandemic and then what we sort of learned through the pandemic. But that said, I will just mention that we are needing that last week we had 3.5 hours with folks. Today we have 2 hours. And so there will be some things that we're going to condense a little bit, but I wanted to give you a heads up that we will be sharing the full set of PowerPoint slides that we used last week and that we use and that we'll be using today. We all also, even in this virtual environment, want to make sure we have time and attention to your questions. So just as a quick note that we have the question and answer function on this webinar is the way in which you can submit questions. And that's where Carla and Marla will be assisting and watching out for those, and we will pause also kind of throughout. So just as a heads up for that. So with that said, we are going to dive right in because there's a few things to get covered. So I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint. All right. I already covered. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to really start with our legislative update. So what took place this last session? What is the new items when it comes to state financial assistance through the legislative session? We'll spend some time talking about Washington College Grant, moving on to Washington College Grant Connect, which you already received some things in writing about that, but we want to really spend some time on that. We're going to go at a very, very high level with program updates that are not Washington College Grant or legislatively related, and then talk about the participation renewal and at a very high level some of WASAC's initiatives. We will be taking questions throughout, so like I said earlier, feel free to be submitting when you have a question through that Q&A. As a reminder, so we are here on May 25th. We are hosting the virtual webinar, but I also wanted to just mention that we will be doing a series of other webinars in June, and we have those dates here that I will show at the end of the presentation that go in more specifically on some programs like State Work Study, like Passport. They will be individual sessions that are, we hope that you or members of your team will join us there. And after this, we will also be sending out details about those webinars as well. One thing that I'd like to kind of just mention that as a state agency, we also have a 10-member council that sets the strategic direction for agency and our work. And if you've attended some of our other sessions in the past, you know that key driver here to the work that we do is about increasing the number of credentialed Washingtonians. And we really know that our workforce needs 70% of attainment rate of credentials, and that we have been sitting right around 62 for a very long time. And so to move that is very difficult, and it requires really intentional and aligned policies and strategies. The other thing, and I'm not, I think that we need to kind of dive into the details of the financial aid programs, but I do just want to take kind of a minute to talk about this goal and the strategic framework, because it will come back up as we talk about some of the things that showed up during the legislative session. So when we think about that attainment rate of credentials, it's not only just 70%, but to do that with racial equity at the core and center of that work. And last year, our council made explicit the need to address racial equity gaps. So this is for your reference. We have significant gaps in many of our race and ethnicity demographics here. What our work is kind of carried out with our strategic framework with these 4 areas of work with equity at the center: affordability, enrollment, completion, and student support. And just a quick note here that I think a lot of times when folks think about state financial aid, you think about affordability, but I know your work and our work together shows up in all of these areas: enrollment, completion, student supports. So we will be connecting as we go along some of the things that we have seen in the legislature to these areas of focus. And the idea here is if we build an affordable and supportive educational environment, more Washington residents will enroll in and complete a credential-bearing program. So I could have spent a lot more time on that, but we are going to move ahead and spend some time and focus on this last legislative session in 23. So this last session was what is considered a long session. Next year will be a short session, so fewer days in that legislative session. In a long session like we had in 23 this year, the legislature is looking at the biennial budget, the budget for the next 2 years. We tracked, as normal, a number of bills related to student financial aid, as well as post-secondary in general. And so we will be talking through really all of the financial aid related bills. But in general, I like to just mention that this year we didn't see some of the big expansions or other initiatives that we have seen maybe over the course of the last few years. In a lot of ways, we saw kind of holding kind of the status quo, but there are definitely a few exceptions to that we'll speak about. But there, so we'll get there. The other thing, and you don't need to read kind of everything here on this page, but I want to explain it because as a follow-up to this session, I will be, or our office will be sharing this in electronic format. And what this is our bill tracker. Everything that you see that in the version that we're going to share is things that were passed. So sometimes some of you know that you get a tracker from us during session, and those bills, not all of them make it through. So what this tracker is going to be is all of the post-secondary items that we were tracking on that passed. We are going to cover everything in green. In green today, those are the items that we believe are related to state financial aid programs, but we wanted to give you really the whole entire tracker because it could be that your colleagues on your campus are interested in some of the other post-secondary related bills that passed this session. All right, so now diving into specific bills or legislation that passed, I want to start with college-bound scholarship. So up until now, there has been a requirement for all college-bound students to have a 2.0 high school graduation GPA to be able to be then college-bound eligible and receive it in post-secondary. The legislature has now passed it in which that 2.0 high school GPA is only required for students that are seeking direct admission to a public or private four-year college. I'm going to come back to seeking direct admission in just a moment, but to mention that, so for two-year colleges, you will no longer need that. That's no longer a requirement to receive funding in college bound for those students. Seeking direct admission, what that means is there kind of if a student's very first stop in post-secondary is a four-year college. So what we can see is that a student might they might not have a 2.0 high school GPA. They might first go to a two-year college and then transfer to a private four-year college. They would be, they would meet that eligibility. They don't really meet it. They don't have to meet that 2.0 in either case, their first stop at a two-year college and then the transfer to the four-year. So it's just that direct admission folks that are coming out of high school into a public or private four-year college. So that's something to keep in mind. What we know here is that this requires that we have different tools and indicators in our WASAC portal so that those of you at two-year colleges are not getting the things that stop an award of a college-bound student. So really want to recognize Gabi and our IT team and other WASAC folks that are working on this as the highest priority and needing to get it into place by July 1. And so more details about exactly how that's going to look in the portal will be coming, but know that that those changes are already being worked through. I also just want to mention that there was a couple other things in the bill related to how WASAC and the Education Research and Data Center share information about college-bound scholarship recipients. So we already send ERDC information about college-bound students, but what this is requiring is that if ERDC gathers any information about college-bound students that WASAC doesn't have, that they then need to share that with WASAC. And we will be also required to be submitting to the legislature annually information about college-bound scholarship recipients. So we have done this on a few occasions, but this is now a requirement. So I'm going to just pause for a second. Carla, I'm going to check in with you and see if there's any questions.
Yes, there is one question that Gabi would like to answer live. And the question is, do you have 23-24 Washington College Grant and College Bound Scholarship Award amounts? Gabi?
Thank you. Yes, the Washington College Grant Award amounts, College Bound, they are all posted on our wasac.wa.gov FAA resources page. And they were also emailed out, I believe, a week or so ago. But the FAA resource page has all of that information posted.
Thanks, Gabi. And there's one more Becky, are there any talks about not requiring the 8th grade signups? We have so many students who are still missed but meet all the requirements, or an appeal process for those who are missed.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember if it was last year or the year before, where we moved from a sign up process to an auto enrollment process, which WASAC through a data exchange, any student that is a free and reduced price lunch eligible is automatically enrolled in the College Bound Scholarship Program. So we were happy to see that change. So it would be helpful maybe in terms of whoever submitted that question to understand a little bit more about you know, who's getting missed, how they are getting missed, but there is no longer a paper application required by the student and the parent. The other thing that I would just kind of mention, while we think College Bound Scholarship is really, really important for that early outreach and the messages that those students get throughout their high school kind of, you know, years, we know that for at least students that are attending public colleges, if the value and sort of the dollars that they are receiving are being matched on the Washington College Grant side with now Washington College Grant plus the Bridge Grant. So they, at public colleges anyways, they're not losing out in any funding if they qualify for all the other, you know, income, etc. once they hit post-secondary. But I agree that we don't want to be missing anybody in that auto enrollment process because important messaging is happening during the high school years.
And the follow-up to that question, Becky, it was from Johanna Dwyer. She said, I think it would be the students prior to the auto enrollment. Could there be an appeal process?
There is already an appeal process in place. So if and so you can always direct a student to our office. And we, you know, we don't have a lot of room there, but there are some circumstances that we can take a look at and review their you know, their appeal. And our office, WASAC's office, handles that.
That's all the questions.
All right, thanks, Carla. And thanks for those that submitted it. Questions. All right, so I'm going to move us on, and I want to first just note kind of a visual clue here that there's a couple places where it's important to not only cover what happened in the 23 legislative session, but to cover like what happened historically over time. And this is one of those areas. So you'll see that this heading is in green. And so we're going back in time for a minute of the 22 session, in which you might recall that last year I said something like, hey, the legislature passed a state student loan program, but there was a technical issue. We cannot access those dollars and start kind of the process of developing that program. So this, as a reminder, was initially passed last year. And at that time, it said the very earliest that the awards would begin would be the 24-25 academic year. But we now have seen a change in the 23 legislative session. A couple pretty important things to know about the changes to the underlying statute now. So there is still a state student loan program. They have kind of delayed by a year, or kind of pushed to a year, to 25-26 academic year. That would be the very first time in which WASAC would be able to issue student loans through this program. They also changed the interest rate. Last year, it was referring to a 1%. Now the statute indicates 2.5%. They've also placed a $20,000 annual maximum borrowing limit. Maximum loan repayment period is 25 years. So let me talk about a few of these things, and there's another slide or two on this that is important to talk about. So even though we have kind of this annual maximum borrowing limits, we don't see an aggregate or a lifetime limit. We think that the having 25 years is an important piece here, allows us to consider income repayment options for students. And then a note to just indicate that, this is going to require that WASAC work with a lot of folks, and we will be seeking out national experts that will consult with us on program design. But it's also really important that we are working with you all, the community, starting with our financial aid work group, as well as our students, student advocates, about what they would like to see. It's our intent to have a very student-friendly program with, and a lot of those details have to be worked through program design initially, and then it will go through a formal rulemaking process before we ever are issuing any loans to any students beginning in the 25-26 academic year. So all that to say, this is not even close to the last time you will hear about this. We will be talking about this, in the, starting this summer with program design and keeping you up to date and asking for input along the way. The other really important thing to keep in mind in terms of like narrowing the scope a little bit about who's eligible for the program, it is now has been changed to only graduate students with residency. The residency is that is in alignment with residency for Washington College Grant and College Bound Scholarship, meaning U.S. citizenship is not required, but residency is. And then there's also language about students needing to be in a high demand program in statute. And when I say statute, for those of you that might be new to the profession, just means the law. So that's, clear. We always have to follow that. And then sometimes we have other flexibility. And this is, true in this case. So in statute, high demand is defined in these areas of healthcare, behavioral health, education, law enforcement, and public safety. But there's also language that WASAC can also determine other high demand fields. And so this would be another area in which we would need to be seeking out some guidance, input, and thinking about other kinds of high demand. It also allows us to really get a sense of being able to over time be flexible if there high demand sort of changes over time. All right, I'm also going to just pause and see if there's questions on the state student loan.
We do have a question. Would loans and repayments go through a loan servicer like Fed loans?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we believe at WASAC, we'll have to go through the process, but that we will be contracting for servicing and repayment in this program. And through state contracting, that requires kind of a competitive bid process. But again, we're kind of a ways off from that. We would need to first set up kind of the program design to make sure that we have servicers that we're interested in, that they know what the terms and conditions and the requirements of being a servicer or in the program. Great question. All right. Okay, I'm going to move us on to a couple others. Here, we wanted to talk about Senate Bill 5079. I think we have I think the four-year publics to really thank for this bill and kind of their work on it. This requires the Office of Financial Management to transmit to public colleges the maximum annual increase of tuition for residents October 1 prior to that academic year. So essentially almost a full year in advance of an academic year. We wanted to talk about this because we think it has a nice tie-in with Washington College Grant, since those award values at public colleges is tied to tuition, that it allows us now to be able to message out, as early as, 9 or 10 months in advance of an academic year, the value of Washington College Grant. The next one has to do with our Washington Health Corps program. Washington Health Corps may be a program that you're not as familiar with because it's currently administered by WASAC for those working in health professionals as health professionals. So they're already credentialed, and it's a loan repayment program. So paying off or paying down educational debt, student loans for those working in underserved healthcare sites. So I just mentioned that because the bill that got passed this year, 1763, is allows, and it talks about and makes changes to a conditional scholarship program, not the loan repayment. So we have been allowed to do conditional scholarships for health professionals for a very long time in the program, but because of limited funding and other priorities as set by our advisory committee, we have not been administering the loan, the conditional scholarship program. But with this change in the statute, as well as some additional funding that we received for Washington Health Corps, it is going to be a decision that we're going to revisit. So I don't know what the outcome of that will be, but I just wanted to let you know that that is going to be something that's going to be revisited in the coming months. What it does is for those that that would breach like their contract, the interest rate is set at 2%. Right now, the current rate is the equivalent of the direct student loan program. So how a conditional scholarship works, and many of you might be familiar with our educator workforce programs, including teacher shortage. It would look similar to that, where those pursuing health profession types of credentials would be receiving conditional dollars to be received as financial aid, but they sign a contract to then indicate that they would then serve in Washington State in underserved areas, for that then to become, that they then, as long as they do that, there's no penalty, there's no payback. So typically we see like 1 year of funding, then 2 years in which they're working in the state of Washington. But there's also this language that allows for wraparound services to the extent, again, quoting, reasonably practical. So I think this is also another area that we are going to revisit. And I think this language here just allows us, it doesn't require, but it would allow us to do some funding to you all as campuses to help support these students, like we see in campus support funding for Passport. So this is sort of modeled by Passport. So again, just, mentioning this is not currently an active part of the program, but we will be revisiting it, and I'm not sure what that feedback is going to be, but we'll seek out your feedback as well as our advisory committee that is, health professionals working in the field that we work closely with on our loan repayment side. Moving on to Washington Opportunity Scholarship Program, just as a reminder, WASAC does not administer this program, so we're just sharing it for informational purposes. But you will see that this change allows the Opportunity Scholarship Board to create and contract with private nonprofit corporations for program administration. And it did also modify the state match for Opportunity Scholarships and Rural Job Program. Just as a heads up on that loan repayment, kind of going back to what I said about Washington Health Corps and our already active program on the loan repayment side, there has been an added sub program within that for forensic pathologists. So I'm going to be learning a lot about forensic pathologists for the in the coming 6 months or so. This is a expansion like we saw last year with nurse educators. All right. The next set of slides are sort of on the same topic, but I want to do a little bit of a setup here that I think is really important. One thing that I just wanted to make sure that you all knew and I encourage you to take a look at it, is on our website is a report about student basic needs that WASAC did in partnership with Western Washington University as part of an action agenda of Washington Post-Secondary Basic Needs Coalition. And that was a survey of 39 college or over 9,000 students at 39 colleges responding to questions about food and housing security or insecurity that students were experiencing. And we were able to go into session, and this is really tied to that work in our strategic framework around student support, feeling that it's really important that there's a good understanding of really the needs of students when it comes to housing and the insecurity that they're experiencing, and housing and food. And so you have kind of those results on our website, and we had those available going into session. I think that in combination, and the really powerful piece has been the students that have been telling their own stories about what they're facing as well. And what you see is some really great legislation here addressing those insecurities. So they're listed here, Basic Needs Act, supporting students experiencing homelessness program, and expanding child care subsidies. So I just wanted to kind of talk about these at a high level, starting with the basic needs security. And so what this is going to be requiring is that public, community, and technical colleges, baccalaureate colleges, and a tribal college create a hunger-free and basic needs strategic plan by April 1st of 24. There's some dollars to hire benefits navigators to assist students with accessing resources, and then requiring the participation data collection. So wanting to make sure that while we've done this survey, that we can continue to really understand that through data collection, and that there is then going to be a joint report to the activities addressing basic needs insecurity every 2 years, starting in 25. So that's one of the items that has passed and we'll be implementing. We also see a new free and reduced price food pilot. So free and reduced price lunch is often something we think about with K-12 schools. Excited to see an expansion here and looking at what this looks like for post-secondary at a post-secondary level. And so there's funding to have 3-year pilot to test proactive, and proactive is the key word here, food security strategies. So we know that emergency funding has been critical, food pantries, short-term, etc. Looking though in terms of really, as we move forward, think about what is important to create that proactive environment. And so for this pilot, there will be 2 public baccalaureate programs selected, and that selection will happen by the college council of presidents. So not by WASAC, but council of presidents. And then 4 CTCs, community and technical colleges, selected by the state board. And you'll see some dollars here in terms of the funding that is to be allocated for these pilots. The other piece, many of you have been involved in a pilot program, which is supporting students experiencing homelessness pilot. Happy to see that that has been moved to a permanent program. And we're assuming, or the funding looks like it's going to be about $102,000 per institution for the 23-24 year, and also requires some joint reporting. And just, I'm not going to go into detail here, but to also say that childcare has been, I think, something that is also something that, you know, really is important to be addressed. We saw some expansion here with a couple programs for state subsidies in childcare. All right, Carla, I saw you come off mute, so I'm just going to pause.
We do have one question that came in right after we started forging ahead from the state student loan program. Ashley asks, will schools need to apply to participate, or if we participate in WCG, we are good? And that's in reference to the state student loan program.
Great question. I think that's to be determined. So already we know that it will be a subset of colleges that participate in state aid, because it's only going to be colleges that have graduate programs. So that's sort of already kind of a subset. I think it's possible that that it could be that there's priority within then that subset, but I think there would have to be a lot of conversation and reason to sort of to go that route. So that's one of the things in terms of needing to tackle related to program design. So we would be seeking input on that. Oh, and I should mention that kind of that subset is, it's not just graduate students, but we would also want to look at, and what could reduce it further is how we might define in demand. Is that what it was? In demand, high demand fields. And so it could be that by us defining that is also going to reduce the number of colleges participating in the program. Hope that helps. Okay. All right. We're going to move on to the Washington National Guard Grant Program. So this is also where we're going to go back in time for a minute to the 22 session. During the 22 session, WASAC had asked and made agency request legislation that was in fact passed, in which the maximum award value for National Guard was adjusted. And so no longer do we need to kind of take into consideration or reduce a maximum award on other federal or state aid. But what didn't come with that was additional funding at the time. We also saw last year the addition of graduate students as eligible for the National Guard funding. But what we have done, as those of you that work in this program might know, so we decided, even though it's permissible, we did not expand to graduate students because we already knew that we were going to be short on funding. And then we implemented award values that were about half of what's allowable statutorily. And so that's how we've been operating. So we went into this legislative session asking for full funding for National Guard grant that would cover all eligible students at the statutory allowable language around an award. But we got some additional funding, but not all of it that we asked for. So what we are going to be doing for the 23-24 year, and we did this by seeking out counsel with our National Guard colleagues who work on this program with us. We are keeping the 23-24 award values at the same rate they were for this current academic year. But we're happy to say that the funding should be able to cover all eligible students, except we're still not adding graduate students to the program. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about what the student experience is going to look like and a couple changes there. But for you all, you will not see a change to this program, except potentially an increase in a number of students receiving this award for on your campus. All right. Okay, I'm going to talk about, again, legislation that passed in 22 that we're sort of carrying out as we move forward. So this is House Bill 1835 from 22 session. What part of that bill did, and I'll talk about other parts in a minute, but one related to Washington College Grant, was to allow for there to be a process in which students that are enrolled in one of these 3 public benefit programs that are specifically named, that they essentially can access Washington College Grant or meet income criteria, that's what I should say, without a FAFSA or a WASFA. They still have to meet, you know, residency, eligible program, other types of things, but they can access Washington College Grant without filing a FAFSA or a WASFA. And so those 3 programs, Age, Blind, and Disabled, Essential Needs and Housing Support Benefits, and Pregnant Women Assistance Program. We are calling this the Washington College Grant Connect program. And we are going to spend in the time we have together this afternoon digging in on this specifically. But right now, I just wanted to give that context and to mention again that this was that it passed in the 22 session, and we're now implementing it for the 23-24 year. Some other things that happened in the same legislation, 1835, is the promotion of Washington College Grant and FAFSA WASFA filing. And so directed WASAC to conduct statewide advertising campaign to increase the awareness of Washington College Grant. I don't know if anyone's seen our ads, but they are out in the world through social media, on buses, on billboards, in some cases on TV. In some cases, multiple languages. And I know that you received some information from us that branding, to give you a sense of what that branding looks like, and the fact that for the purposes of that campaign, calling it WA Grant as kind of an acronym, a shorter version of Washington College Grant. So hopefully you've seen them. We know that parents and students have seen them. And we know that it is driving a lot of traffic to our website, which is what we wanted, because we want kind of that action. And so we still have some measurements to do there, but they're coming to our website, seeing those ads, and then we hope then completing FAFSA WASFAs, having a better sense of their eligibility for Washington College Grant. There was also other things in the same area of really wanting to boost the awareness. So funding went to the state board for community and technical colleges for some outreach specialists. We had some funding go to the state libraries to also be promoting state financial aid. And then there's collaboration going on between WASAC and DSHS on creating awareness and usage of Washington College Grant, because we know that many of the clients of DSHS would meet income eligibility for WA grant. And so we know that that's a good way to be able to an likely eligible population. We want good information going to them. Moving on to some other things that I want to make sure are still kind of a little bit on your radar. In the 22 session, a lot of work on apprenticeships. That is still the case. I'll cover a few slides also about what is happening in terms of apprenticeship, but not going to spend really time just adding to your awareness that and a reminder that Washington College Grant was expanded to apprenticeship programs. And we're still, though, a long way from kind of good access to potential apprentices in accessing those dollars. So working on ways in which we can expand participation and access in that program. Another piece, what I would just call this a WASAC initiative related to our strategic action plan. And that is that last year we received funding to roll out our challenge grant programs. The idea here is that we feel it's really important that communities that are trusted by target populations are they are doing the work, that we WASAC are listening to them, that they're able to try out things with regional approaches, because they're the ones on the ground doing that. So we have 8 awardees from that funding. We got some additional funding this year, so we'll likely be expanding the number of awardees that are receiving challenge grant funding. And those aren't necessarily post-secondary institutions, but community organizations, but partnerships is a key piece to this. And so they could be part of the grant application, could be that they've partnered with you or another post-secondary on their work. A lot happened in 22. We're still talking about it because it's still kind of being implemented and rolling out. So one of those things was a state support of the federal public service loan program. So now within WASAC's loan advocate office, we have Jessica, who is working specifically on the public service loan forgiveness program. And so, her job is to increase public awareness of public service, to make sure questions are being answered, and also then coordinating with other parts of state government to make sure that employees of the state and others have the materials they need to be able to submit their own public service loan forgiveness application, and that they're getting kind of that certification done. It was very rewarding, I think, as we were out talking last week. A couple people actually shared in the group that they, as public employees, as financial aid administrators, had recently been able to receive public service loan forgiveness. So I mention this because it could be that you might be eligible for public service loan forgiveness, or it could be really good for you to be, or a resource for you to be able to share with your alumni or others that we do have some support in our office for that process. Okay, and now really going back in time, and I want to mention this. So this was passed in the 2020 legislative session. The first one I want to mention, because I get several questions a year on this, I'm guessing that you all might do the same, but you might recall that in 2020, an undocumented student loan program was passed, but it was contingent on private donations. And we have sought private donations, but we have been unsuccessful to date. And so without funding, that program is not an active program. And so I just like to make sure that we mentioned that in case you get any questions about that. And then finally in 2020, there was in one of the bills some language about WASAC developing consistent definitions for financial aid awards. So I'm really appreciative of our financial aid work group who really helped us with this and pointed us to the fact that NASFA has ethics policies in place that covered most of this. And so we were able to kind of point to that. I mention it in this presentation because we did issue guidance just this year, January 5th, 2023. So you can find that guidance also on our FAA page on our website if this doesn't sound familiar, but I believe that most colleges were already carrying this out based on following NASFA's guidelines. All right. Well, I am going to now pass it over to Carly, who is going to do the next little section. And I should have mentioned after this, we are going to take kind of just a stretch break because being on Zoom for 2 hours it can be a little rough. So take it away, Carly.
Thanks, Becky. I just want to make sure my slides, I think I can see, everyone should be able to see everything right now. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here to talk through some of our aid programs. Again, my name is Carly Curley. I use pronouns she, her, and I'm now in the assistant director role for need-based programs. So likely if you email into WCG, you're going to hear from me. So before the break, we're going to just talk a little bit about Bridge Grant, what to expect with that. So let's get that going. For those that are a little bit new to this program, and actually we kind of all are new to this program because Bridge Grant is relatively new to us. What it is an annual stipend, and it's to be awarded in addition to the Washington College Grant to provide that supplementary support for students, things like books, kind of similar to like the book allowance for College Bound scholarship. It's for students that qualify for the highest amount of Washington College Grant. And so for this upcoming year, those will be the students that fall into the 65% MFI category. So yeah, Bridge Grant, we love it. Good news about Bridge Grant. I know this is a question earlier on. It will continue for the next couple years. It was set in the biennium budget. So it isn't an official program through statute, but it is going to be, we have funding for it through the next couple of years. And so what that means is that it would need to be budgeted again in future legislative sessions to go beyond 2024-25. As you may be aware, the maximum annual award is going to be $500, and it can be either dispersed as a lump sum, or you can divide that over the students' enrolled terms. And of course, we defer to schools to determine the best situation for their students and set their policy accordingly for that. Really important that it's awarded during the first term available because sometimes it gets missed, and then there's other types of situations that can happen if the student doesn't get awarded within their first term. So really, really important to remember that. Make sure it's awarded at the same time that other state aid is awarded. So make sure that when you're awarding Washington College Grant, that you're awarding Bridge Grant as well if the student is eligible. Award amount can be less. So if there's no need remaining, it can be less than $500 if you're doing lump sum, or less than the quarterly or semester amount. If there's no need for students. So who's eligible to receive the Bridge Grant? Who are these lucky people that get this additional $500? So students in the maximum Washington College Grant award and still have need remaining. So again, 0 to 65% for this upcoming academic year are enrolled in at least 3 credits and meet SAP. So all of those normal things are kind of true. The 3 credit rule is a little bit different in the way that they can receive the full 500 if they're a lump sum award at 3 credits. They can receive their full award no matter how the school is awarding at 3 credits. So it doesn't need to be prorated. College-bound students are not eligible to receive the Bridge Grant. And you can take a look at the CVS eligibility cruncher to see if a student is college-bound eligible. Also, it's a good thing to note that if a student doesn't qualify for college-bound, if for some reason, maybe they're past their 5 years of eligibility, they don't have any quarters remaining, maybe there's another reason they didn't sign up, variety of reasons why they might not be eligible for college bound, they can get Bridge Grant in lieu of that. So it's okay if they're college bound eligible, like eligible for the program, but maybe don't necessarily have eligibility because of a variety of factors that I just mentioned. They can get the Bridge Grant in that case. Some of the questions we get sometimes are, how can I figure out who these students are? There's not necessarily an eligibility checker. Oops, sorry. Wow, went fast there. There isn't necessarily an eligibility checker or, cruncher necessarily for these students, but there actually is a great way to kind of indicate who your students might be for a given year. And that's through using the portal. I don't know about you, but when I was in aid administration, I wasn't as familiar with the training portal, but we do have a training portal. And this is a place that refreshes every night, does not impact the regular portal. And it's a place where you can actually go in and, play around basically with things and see how things are working. If you're really curious and you're like, I'm new to this portal thing and Seesaw, how does this all work? What if I do this to a student? It's an excellent resource for you to try things. So in addition to that, you can upload your file, and what will happen is, as you know, you can download a list of your edits once your file is uploaded into Seesaw. Now you can sort your edits, and you can see here, there's going to be an edit that will say student is Bridge Grant eligible and is not awarded. And that could be some pre-awarding for you to do by using that method. So this can also be used for Passport and other programs that you may have not awarded the student for upfront. We recommend doing that anytime. You can feel free to do it in the training portal, in the regular portal, uploading and getting those students awarded for the upcoming year. So that's just a hot tip for you if you're looking into doing that for your students. If your system maybe doesn't have a way to award those students, this is a great tool. And also, just again, encourage you to check out the training portal. It's going to be an excellent resource for you. Before we go into break, I just wanted to check and see if you have any questions that I could answer, Carla.
The only question we had that I think everybody can see was regarding the Bridge Grant, and if a student only has eligibility for $80, can they receive that $80? And I responded offline saying, yes, they can receive that $80 up to need.
Up to need. Thank you,
That's
Carla.
it.
We're going to start talking about one of my favorite grants of all time. That would be the Washington College Grant, everybody. I think we all love this grant. It's one of the most generous grants in all of the United States. And so I know Becky talked a little bit about WA Grant. And so this is just kind of a marketing tool for students to be aware that they can apply for state aid. You don't have to change any of your wording with any of your aid programs or anything like that. WA Grant is Washington College Grant, but using this terminology is kind of more inclusive of just other career pathways. So, there isn't just, the college pathway. We definitely have Washington College Grant for apprenticeship. We're going to have this Washington College Grant Connect. All of these things give students and apprentices, different pathways to school. And so using this one umbrella term of WA Grant is kind of the way that we're going about that when we are, in the community. So it'd be awesome to know if you have seen some of the billboards or any of the things that we have been using as tools for marketing. I know there's TV ads. Becky mentioned some of those. But yeah, just so you know, if you see it, that's kind of the whole purpose of using this terminology. So a little bit about the wording that we're using here, and feel free to use this wording as well. So WA Grant is generous, find out if you qualify for this. As you all know, we're always telling students and apprentices, apply. So complete the WASFA or FAFSA, make sure that, see if you qualify for this and how much that could be for you. It's flexible. You have options. So this is kind of reaching people that may be attending less than full time, or, non-traditional students that this could still work for. And so resources for these students, we do have in Spanish and in English, wogrant.org, the ability for, students to reach out that'll redirect to our page, which links to everything, applications, WASFA application, FAFSA application, eligibility charts, and so on. We also have a really great financial aid calculator on our site now that will estimate WA grant as well as Pell Grant if they have an EFC. And that's part of the process of putting in information for this calculator. So students it notes on top that if you don't have an EFC, don't put one in, just not to confuse students that may be qualifying for state aid only through the state aid application. The financial aid toolkit is there. So if you're looking for any social media content, promotional flyers, things like that, this is going to be your place to go and to look for different tools. So what has our funding been looking like? It has really gone up steadily since 2018, but kind of leveling out here. And, that has to do with a couple different things. It has to do with just enrollment levels. That's kind of where a lot of our funding is based off of. And what we love, though, is now it's an entitlement for students. So you probably see, back when we had served and unserved populations, now we have everyone is served and it's an entitlement for those students. And that's what we love to see. So this is a moment in time just to encourage those that are completing the interim report. This is why that report is so incredibly important for forecasting. So what happens behind the scenes is we give that deadline. We have another deadline for our forecast council, and they are the ones providing that very specific funding information so that we can make sure that we have enough funding for students on a given year. So thank you to all of those that are completing interim reports and for your amazing time in getting those in on time. If not, you get to hear from me, which is really fun. Although you see my face now, I'm friendly. I'm just letting you know that we need to get your report in, but it is very important and it's crucial for our student population. Couple reminders. Guaranteed funding, like I just talked about. We love that. Guaranteed funding for eligible students. We expanded the eligibility to 100%, I believe, last year. Still have that 15-quarter, 10-semester maximum, although we are working on expanding that. That was a bill that we had in legislation this year. However, it didn't pass. If you would talk to Becky, we're going to continue to put that bill on the docket until it passes and hopefully extend that another year so that it kind of mirrors the federal Pell Grant program. So hopefully 1 year we'll have that passed. Students need to have unmet need to receive this. 8 eligible programs that contain apprenticeships remain eligible for regular Washington College Grant, and registered apprenticeships award amounts match the CTC award amounts. And so that's kind of listed on our award sheet that's in the FAA resources webpage as well. What's new? A lot. Can you see? No. A couple things that are new and really important for you to know. 100% eligibility was expanded to 65%. So this is wonderful. Really, this just aligns with our college bound limit. And so everyone that has college bound has max Washington College Grant for this upcoming year. So really, really positive change. This is a change that happened in the budget. And not in the statute. So this is something that was put through the biennium. And so we will have that for the next couple of years, I believe, unless anything is changed. Another new thing is we're going to have an optional incremental file upload. And for those of you that do the unit record report, this is something that you might be familiar with already. But I'm going to talk a little bit about that on our next slide here. So right now, what's going on? We have a full file upload, and you're used to, when you go into Seesaw, seeing that, okay, once you upload this, this is going to actually delete any prior information that was in Seesaw. So just make sure that's what you want to do. That's the basic of what it says, but it's a lot more short and concise when you're uploading. It requires all student enrollment data, so it's a full file every time. and awards to be included or awards to be deleted, and it's going to overwrite everything in the portal. So what that does though, sometimes is it requires you to readdress edits that you've probably already addressed at a certain time. And so that can just be a lot more administratively for those that are completing the interim report. And another reminder here, this is just a reminder about what $0 looks like in a fund. So the Seesaw or the portal is going to read $0 as need met. So if it's in the case of where you didn't award college bound per se, you know, for example, or passport because they were out of need, you would want to put a 0. But if the student doesn't meet eligibility for a fund, so say you have a bridge grant and you have college bound and you know they received college bound, they're not eligible for bridge grant, you want to leave that blank. Blank just means they're not eligible at all. 0 means it's because their need has been met. So just something we've ran into with interim reports and kind of just some helpful reminders as you're completing that process. So what is an incremental file load and what's that going to do for you in terms of what that will look like, how that's going to change your process, anything like that. So basically what an incremental file does is allows you to upload partial student data instead of the full file. And what it does is it basically allows you to just upload changes so that you're not having to look at the edits from every single student every single time you do a full file load. What it will require is that you add one new column at the beginning of your file. And we do currently have a template of this in FAA resources as well as in Seesaw. And the file is going to be called is delete. And you would mark a Y if you want to delete the student awards, as well as put in any other additional information that has changed. So uploading this incremental student data will not affect any of the student awards that are not listed in the file. So that's kind of the important thing. And like I said, that kind of mirrors what we've been doing for the unit record report, if you're familiar with that. Working with your IT team, working with whoever sets up your report, you can send them the template, the Excel template for the sample file and kind of get that going if that seems like a really good option for you. So here's a little bit about what income eligibility looks like for next year. So again, like I said, it's kind of a small amount of MFIs to look at. We have that 0 to 65%. You know, a family of 4 could make up to 73,000 and still get that 100% award, and so on. You also see how the award is prorated based on the MFI. So it's a 50% proration for, you know, up to 70% MFI. And so on and so on. So that's a little bit about what it looks like, but thank you to the person earlier who asked about, you know, where can I find this information? And your best place to always look for things is going to be that FAA resources page. You'll find a ton of information. And in fact, you'll probably find this webinar. We'll post it there so that you can refer to it in the future. So the maximum amounts for public institutions, the way that those are set is to cover full tuition and fees. And award amount is prorated based on income eligibility and enrollment level. I'm sure you all are kind of familiar with that, that it cannot exceed need, and they have to be reported, and funds should be requested at the beginning of each term. So this is kind of something to just be thinking on in terms of timing for everything. So we received many questions about students who are, you know, Washington College Grant eligible, but have no remaining need due to scholarships, et cetera. These students are not eligible because Washington College Grant cannot exceed need. So that's something to note about. And really just an important note about it, requesting funds at the beginning of the school year and continuing to do that throughout the school year. Every 30 days is recommended, but making sure that you're requesting those funds as often as possible, and especially before you submit your interim report, you want to make sure to request those funds. This next bit, I'm going to invite Becky back on for a little bit, and then I will be right back to talk about more funding.
Thanks, Carly. I am back briefly to talk about some awarding considerations. So as I talk about this, I just want to mention and just also express a lot of gratitude for you all, when you reach out to our office with questions, etc. We also review every single, edit. Well, I don't, but our office does appreciate kind of all the hard work of folks all the way around when it comes to interim reporting. And so something that has come up recently in kind of looking at that and looking at what's coming up with edits made us think that we needed to really look at the language that we're using and being very clear on how we're defining a couple things. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the definition around a retroactive award. And I just want to say from the top on this one, this is not a change in policy. This is what's been in place. This continues to be what's in place, but it's important that we define it so then we can talk about what a late award is and how that is different than a retroactive award. So a retroactive award is when a student completes their financial aid application late, but has previously been enrolled and currently attending. And so there's situations where you have, you're reviewing financial aid application after a term has passed. So at that time, a student can only be awarded for the credits completed for any retroactive award when you're looking back and you're awarding for a term that has already passed. Okay, so this has been in place, it still remains in place. What is important then to look at is what's kind of coming up now is what we're going to call a late award. A late award is when a college you all have initially awarded a state aid or even a federal aid program, but you don't award all of the types of aid that they're eligible for at that same time. So sometimes I know that there's reasons that this happens, like you have haven't done the cruncher or someone else awards those awards, etc. But you have awarded some aid, but not all the aid that they're eligible for. In these cases, what we are stating is that student award needs to be awarded at the same level as the initial award. I think it's helpful to maybe kind of walk through an example, and why it's important and why I think it's coming up is, even though it's been in place for a couple years, is our policy related to, when a student is eligible, the repayment policy. So if a student is awarded at full time, for example, let's just say they're awarded Washington College Grant full time, they commence enrollment full time, but they then, so in that case, they are eligible for that full amount, but then they drop to half-time. Well, when they were awarded that initial award, they should have been awarded, you name it, an example like Bridge Grant or College Bound or Passport. You need to kind of like almost take yourself back in time. What would they have been awarded at that time? Because that award was missed. They were eligible at the time, and you need to award it at the same way that you awarded other state aid. So I am, let's see if I covered kind of this, and then I'll see if there's any questions here. But yeah, I mean, I think we really urge you, when at all possible, that you're awarding all state aid at the same time. When you're not, you need to treat that student's award like you would have that initial award. And it's essentially like an error in awarding. We are going to cover this, including, it's been requested that we also include some examples of this in the program manual. So that's getting finalized, and we'll have some examples there. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Becky, we have one lengthy question, and I believe I've seen this one perhaps come across email as well. This is: my associate director attended the Yakima session last week and had the following question. I understand if we misaward a student and do not include Bridge Passport, that we should go back to award at the same level, even if they did not complete the term. However, how does this work if we make a student eligible for the state aid at a later date? For example, we had a student drop in a couple of weeks ago needing funding. In conversation, we found out they had, I think it's supposed to be, had been on their own since April of 2022. The only parent on the FAFSA is incarcerated and will not be out for 5 to 7 years. The student has no contact with them. We were able to make them independent for the aid year. However, they did not pass fall quarter. Are they only eligible for the funds if they pass the courses, since their eligibility was determined after the quarter ended? Or would this student's award qualify as a miss award due to the independent update, since this updates the FAFSA for the entire year? And I can tell you that the response that I have given previously is that because it was essentially a change in status for that student, it would be considered a retroactive award, not a miss award in this instance, because it happened after the end of the term and it was the initial award.
Yes, exactly. Thanks for that question. And I think that does, just allow us to kind of, again, maybe Carly, if you don't mind going back to that kind of the previous slide here. But I think the distinction here is that the retroactive award is that, you're looking at that application when something has previously been taken place. And so versus like they should have actually been awarded and it was sort of misawarded. And so in this case, there's a change in status, as Carla stated. And so that would not be treated as a late award. It is, so the rules of retroactive award apply. Appreciate that question.
Second question: as long as a student attended the first day of the quarter, then we will not ask the student to repay, even if they dropped on the second day of the quarter. Is that right?
Yeah, so that is, well, let me just make a caveat. It's not just that it's like the first day, it's that they have been, they attended class for whatever their award, at least one day for the enrollment level that they were awarded. So it could be, I'm just making this distinction because it could be that all their classes don't start on that very first day of the quarter. But as long as they have attended a day of all the coursework for their enrollment level that their award is based on, that's correct. They do not owe a repayment. This was a common question when we were out and about on the road trip last week. And so I appreciate that. And I think we're also going to make sure there's some maybe additional guidance in the manual on this. And I also think it's a good time to just mention that you also have the ability to submit a alternative policy if you so choose, that we review those and make determinations on that. But the key is that it's in the student's best interest.
No more questions.
All right, back to you, Carly.
Thank you, Becky. Here at 11 a.m., we're going to know. We feel like a newscast sometimes when we're doing this workshop. Let's move on here. We're going to start talking about College Bound Scholarship and Washington College Grant a little bit more too. Just like Becky had a chance to mention today, Just a reminder, there will be that change to no 2.0 requirement for our 2-year schools, as well as transfers entering into our 4-year schools. It only the 2.0 requirement will exist though still for direct admission into 4-year schools. So just an FYI again about that. College Bound Scholarship does provide funding for a small book allowance, but that is built into the College Bound Scholarship amount. And College Bound students receive funding up to 65% MFI. So that's kind of where I talked about that being a good match with the Maximum Washington College Grant. And they get that full amount. So in terms of awarding, sometimes it's can be confusing as far as what's funds to award first. And so this is just a reminder that if a student is passport to college eligible and College Bound eligible, and Washington College Grant eligible, therefore, it always first will be the Washington College Grant. So you want to make sure that you award the Maximum Washington College Grant to the student, and then passport would be next. And in the rare case where the student would not meet their maximum state aid calculation, they could receive College Bound up to that calculation. And so there's a little bit more about that as far as what is considered maximum state aid in the manual to take a peek at. Students need to be awarded for all aid that they're eligible for at the beginning of each term. So again, just a reminder to make sure you're awarding all state programs together to make sure that they're receiving their full amount that they're entitled to. Yeah, students that are receiving or eligible to receive College Bound, again, a reminder, they're not eligible to get Bridge Grant as well. So that would be a case in the interim where you would have a blank spot for Bridge Grant and not a 0, since they're not eligible for Bridge Grant with College Bound scholarship. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, but here's our favorite page, the FAA resources page. All of the updated MFI and award charts are listed there. We will be getting our program manual out there in the next couple weeks, so that will be available to you for the 2023-24 academic year. Beyond that, there's a bunch of resources here. I'm sure many of you have used the residency guidance there, but there's other program guidance, there's legislative session information, any memos that we send out, and most of our trainings are also available on this page. So it's a really great page to look at especially if you're newer to this profession and kind of want to dig in and know more about each program. All right, just an operational consideration. Again, reminder, timely reconciled data from colleges is critical. That goes to our forecast council, make sure that we have enough money for our students each year in the budget. And we will continue to have the interim reporting on a quarterly basis. Do not wait until interim report is due to request your funds. So sometimes I know this can be a process depending on how your office is set up, and maybe you rely on a different office to request the funds. Feel free to get them going on that nice and early and keep requesting those funds throughout the year so that everything is up to date and good to go. Happy news, we've extended the due date for the final interim. We know it's your favorite thing ever to probably do this over the 4th of July weekend, but we thought, we're just going to give them a little bit more time. We've extended the due date to July 17th for this year. And so a couple important things about final interim. So final interim is kind of what gets you ready for this next academic year in terms of participation in our programs, having accessibility to the portal and Seesaw, really important. So there's a couple steps that are going to happen in order for you to be ready for this next academic year. The first step is making sure that any funds that are due to WASAC are sent, and you can, have that information as a part of your final interim. You'll know what you need to send to us if you do owe back some funds. And then we are, I think, currently in the process, or will be in the process, of connecting with schools about their updated participation agreement. So making sure you submit that to us on time, and those will get you ready for this next academic year. Here's some upcoming interim dates to put on your calendar. Get excited, everyone. And you'll notice for the fall, winter, and final reports, we did move those up a week, or sorry, back. No, yeah, up. We moved those back a week. In talking with our forecast council, we noticed that we could provide a little bit more time. Typically, as you know, we will contact you about 4 weeks prior to open up the interim report, give you plenty of time to complete that. You can upload your interim report data anytime within that 4-week window and start working on that. And hopefully this extended time will just be helpful for you all and align a little bit better or align well for you in terms of your calendar. That May 6th deadline is very crucial. So spring interim continues to be very crucial for budget setting for upcoming years. So that's one that is going to be very important to, well, they're all important to get on time, but yeah, May 6th, very important. Along with that, here's some unit record reporting timelines for the 2022-23 year. And just give you a glimpse of when all of that is going to be due and need to be ready. And with that, we're going to start talking about the Washington College Grant Connect, and I'm going to invite Gabi up here.
Bobby, before we jump into that, there
Oh,
is one
yes.
question, there is one question that Becky was going to respond to.
Great, thanks, Becky.
And so the
Yeah.
question is, if there is interest in, is there interest in aligning Bridge and CBS to bring equity? CBS needs to be prorated, but Bridge does not. Also, the impacts of CBS Passport combo students who don't get Bridge, but non-CBS Passport students do.
So thanks so much for that question. We also got a question or like feedback, maybe feedback is the good way to put it, of like really from your colleagues across the state interested in you know, having alignment here. So there's a couple ways that I can sort of address this. One is that I think we WASAC are interested in Bridge Grant in general being part of Washington College Grant. So we saw a couple bills like this that would, you know, essentially then kind of proration values would likely align there. We saw some language, some bills this last year, but they did not pass. So it's still just this budget language. But I do think it's important to know that we, in looking at it, and the reason why it's awarded, the Bridge Grant is awarded like it is right now. And we did add some flexibility for you all to do it over quarters if you want, or over terms if possible, if you wanted to do that, if it was in the best interest of the student. But the legislature, from my read, is very intentional about this, feeling that there are a lot of upfront costs to students and that these amounts should not be prorated. And so that's how it is right now. And so we'll sort of see, I think this will likely be something that very possible that it'll come up next session, and that we're looking into, you know, whether or not we actually, you know, do something that is more like on the request side of things. I think I missed though the passport piece. I don't know that we got that on the, so a CBS Passport student does not get Bridge because their passport, I mean, because they're CBS, but non-CBS passports do qualify. Yeah. I mean, I think the same thing is true there, and that, but I'm glad that you kind of brought that to my kind of attention. I think in general, we want your feedback in general of what do we think is in the best interest of students and also understandable, and whether or not we might move that forward as a request, I think is a question. So if you want to weigh in on this, you can always feel free to reach out. But in general, I think feel like all students really need additional funding, or when we're talking about maximum Washington College Grant students, they can use that funding, and kind of making this distinction between CBS and non-CBS can be very not very clear to students, as well as administratively, it's a lot to kind of work through and get it awarded correctly. So I hear it, and it would have to be, I think, taken up legislatively. All right, Gabi, I think it's to you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gabrielle Matul-Wurst, otherwise known as Gabi. We're going to talk about the Washington College Grant Connect program. Let's see, make sure my slides are moving. All right, so the Washington College Grant Connect, this, as Becky had mentioned earlier, this bill passed in 2022, which allows for automatic Washington College Grant income eligibility for the students in these three programs. The students in these three programs will not need to do FAFSA or WASFA. And just so you understand what type of a population we're looking at right now, the Pregnant Women Assistance Program, what I last heard was there's one person in that program who's about to give birth. And so they will no longer be in that, and they have no others. And the other two programs, they don't have any dependents, because part of the original law says it's to be for participants in these programs plus their dependents. So it's just the people in the programs and won't be any dependents. But we do want to look at, there may be some other public benefit programs that may come on board under the Washington College Grant Connect program. So the goal is to help connect students to higher education and to remove the barriers for paying for college. So the students that we referred to in the previous slide, we don't want to stigmatize any of the students or people wanting to come back for education. So we are calling the program Washington College Grant Connect because we're connecting them to education. But please keep in mind that this is not a new program per se, it's still Washington College Grant. It's just a different way to qualify to receive the Washington College Grant. And this is effective coming July 1st, 2023. So this academic year, we know you're already started awarding. And so I'm sure you're going to have questions. So when you're awarding these students Washington College Grant, they still need to meet all residency requirements, all programmatic requirements of WCG. The only thing that they are not required to have is the FAFSA or the WASFA. But what we really want to encourage these people to do the FAFSA so that they can receive all of the aid that they're eligible for. It's just a way for us to get them connected to education and then work with them to get their financial aid applications completed. And we just wanted to remove some of the barriers that people have in attending college. So what does this mean? Well, if you don't have a FAFSA or a WASFA, you may not know who these students are. So we do recommend that you may need to figure out some coordination with other offices on your campus, whether it's with admissions and running some of these students through the system to see if you are able to identify them. Again, these students are going to be qualifying for the maximum WCG award. And because they are eligible to receive the maximum Washington College Grant Award, they're also qualified to receive the Washington Bridge Grant. All right. So Washington College Grant Connect students who filed the FAFSA or WASFA must be awarded maximum even if the MFI is over 65%. I know I just said they don't have to have a FAFSA or WASFA, but many of the students who are currently in the system have already completed a FAFSA or WASFA. When we ran some of these students through the checker to just see what we were looking at, we did come across a few current students who completed a FAFSA and are over the 65% MFI. So if you come across these students and they didn't get the maximum award amount, we do ask that you readjust the rewards based on the 65% maximum because they are in this Washington College Grant Connect category. But when you're awarding students college-bound scholarship or passport to careers or college passport to college, they must have a FAFSA or a WASFA on file and meet the CBS and passport requirements before they can get any of those two programs. I'm gonna take a pause here and just see, was there any questions pertaining to this part so far?
Yes. If students must have unmet need, which is determined by a financial aid application to receive Washington College Grant, how will we be able to award Washington College Grant Connect to students without an application on file? We are in PeopleSoft CTC link, and the system currently does not allow for the awarding of WCG without unmet need without an application.
Okay, I might need to ask for some help on this. That is a
I'm happy.
Yeah, go ahead, Becky. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this question. So in this case with Washington College Grant Connect, it's not, you actually can treat it as a non-need-based financial aid program if there is not a FAFSA or WASFA for the purposes of Washington College Grant Connect. And so, you know, I will just share what other colleges have said, not to give specific guidance about your system, but a few colleges said that they are going to be setting it up as a separate award type in their system with slightly different rules. But, you know, again, to that student, it still can be called Washington College Grant, but they're sort of setting it up as a different award type with different rules.
And the next question is, how do we keep track of those students if they are not required to complete FAFSA or WASFA? And I think your answer to the prior question may cover that. It's based on the award, setting up with an award type.
Yep.
Next question, will edits be prompted on the interim report when an award is made in excess of the MFI range for a FAFSA WASFA filer?
So yes, we have built in the edits. I'm glancing at the questions that are coming in. So yes, it's going to be effective for the 23-24 academic year, so coming July 1. So if you've already started awarding, we're going to need to look at those. If you're a trailer school.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, Abby, you were going to get there. The trailer school is considered for the summer a 22-23 year, so it would not be awarded. So it's whatever your 23-24 academic year award.
Right. Okay. And
were you reading the next question too, Gob?
I just glanced at it, but if you want to go ahead and answer that one as well.
Okay, so do WCGC students need to have say they do have a FAFSA, WASFA, and a high EFC?
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to just kind of talk about this in two different ways. Like, so if you have a Washington College Grant Connect eligible student, so again, that eligibility is about their financial eligibility and at the maximum rate. So so, if there's no FAFSA or WASFA, there's no way to determine unmet need or need because there's no EFC or, that is calculated. And so you sort of have those are kind of the clear ones related to this question. If you then have a student that is Washington College Grant Connect and then files a FAFSA or WASFA and does not have unmet need, they still are eligible for Washington College Grant Connect in this case. So they are meeting that because the enrollment in that public benefit company or program that is the Washington College Grant Connect program is what makes them passing the federal mean, I mean, not the federal means test, but the means test for the program.
And another question, will we be looking up each individual to make sure that they are not in repayment or have already met, I think they mean QERs with WCG? Okay,
so let me go ahead and move on with the rest of the presentation because it will address that, Maisie. So for us to identify the WCGC eligible students, again, which I mentioned previously, may require some coordination with admissions offices or any of your maybe BFET offices who may have some information that or file lists of students they can share. What you would want to do is we do have an eligibility checker. It is up and live already in the WASAC portal. You can already, if you're curious, load your students into that eligibility checker now to see who, how many students you might have. And what I didn't mention earlier, which I should have, is to let you know that when we looked at the list of students, there was between 200 and I want to say 400 students that are currently in the system that qualify under WCGC. So if you think about 65, 67 schools, there's really not that many per campus. However, we are trying to encourage more people to come on. And so maybe when the word spreads, there will be an increase in these WCGC students. But let me move on to the eligibility checker. We receive all of the data from DSHS on a monthly basis, but it is 1 month delayed. So there is a possibility that a student may come to your office and say that they are a WCG Connect eligible student, but you're not finding them in the checker. In those instances, we'll have you contact our WASAC office, our WCG email, and we will be able to put them into the system if we are able to verify if they have a letter from DSHS that you can verify, then you can let us know when we can put them in. And we're currently in the progress of applying for access to the DSHS benefits verification system. So if that goes through, we'll be able to look them up directly on our side. So that would be fantastic. So that's basically what I just went over. But if you do have a student that comes to your office and states that they are eligible and they have a copy of their letter, we ask that you keep a copy of the acceptance letter and document it in the student's file. And you'll need to email us through the secure portal. It would probably be great if you could send us a copy of their letter, but we will need quite a bit of information on each of those students for us to be able to load them into the system manually. Okay, so here is the Washington College Grant Connect eligibility checker. So some of the questions that I had seen is, yes, you will be able to run students using just Social Security numbers. You can do a file upload with Social Security numbers. You can do an individual name search. And so the example here is for an SSN list search. And when we put it in, these are the fields you're going to see. It's going to show you how much QER they still have, whether or not they are CBS eligible, if they're in repayment. And basically, yep, that's what it's going to show you. So it's going to give you all of that information up front. Was there any other questions that you had regarding this eligibility checker?
We do have a new question or a
Okay.
comment. It seems WCGC is not a need-based program. Even the student has no unmet need and the student will be eligible for WCG. It will be very confusing since the WCG is a need-based program.
I think if you're, oh, go ahead, Becky.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in some ways, it's kind of important to know that the students that are qualifying for WCGC have gone through a means test. They have had to document their income on, to DSHS to qualify for the program. And so I think in some ways, yeah, it's not a need-based program from the vantage point and from the look of like kind of a financial aid process. But it is in some ways we know that these are students low income kind of backgrounds because there has been a means test. So it is so I mean I think that but from a financial aid perspective, it probably in your system looks like a non-need based program.
Thank you. All right, so one thing I noticed I didn't have on here very much of is edits. Yes, you're going to have edits. The system is going to be able to know whether the person is WCG Connect eligible versus those who are not. So in the instances where it has a financial aid application and income information is loaded, it's automatically going to read that for the CBS eligibility. So you're not going to have to, do too much investigating. You will get the edits. It will tell you. If their MFI is over the 65% from their FAFSA, you will get the edit for the WCGC folks to give them the full WCG awards based on being in the program. So that information is in there. And we are still working on developing the part where we are going to be able to manually input the data, but it's very close to being finished. And we will have more information in the program manual, which should hopefully come out, I'm going to say hopefully next week, within the next 2 weeks. And we are already planning a virtual training just for WCGC. I said end of May, but we are end of May now. So early June, we will do individual, specifically a WCGC training, and we will have it recorded and we will post it on our FAA research page. Okay, so if there's any other questions. Oh, I see a bunch popping up now.
And so.
And it could be that we might have to kind of wrap up and maybe review some of those questions and come back out with some answers, unless they are kind of quick right now.
Yeah, I see Chantel's. I'm going to answer that. Yes, all other eligibility requirements need to be met, the same as for WCG. So high school diploma, ability to benefit, residency, and all of those. Okay, so the awarding for the WCGC, that's going to be something we'll have to check out with SBCTC or your IT folks. And
Yeah, I mean, I think other colleges, and I'm pretty sure they were CTC colleagues, but we can follow up on this, saying that they're adding it as a separate award type.
okay, well, you're welcome, Elizabeth. We don't want to be stressed out either. So hopefully it will be not so stressful for all of you, and definitely ask questions anytime you have any. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go on for the rest of the programming.
Yeah. Well, you all, I am going to cover just a couple other quick things. So let me kind of get my screen sharing again, as we need to kind of wrap up here. But what I want to say is that you are going to have a lot of other slides that we will not have time to cover today. They are mostly for your information anyway, but I encourage you to take a look at them. And so I'm going to just hit the high points here. And remember, at the very last slide, we're going to show that we have other training coming up, a webinar series in June. As I already mentioned earlier, terms of apprenticeship, that is still a very hot topic. We're really trying to expand access. And so the one quick thing that I would just mention here is that we brought on board and will be in place for 23-24 for Washington College Grant for apprenticeships, a third part, essentially a new who will act like a contractor. They're going to act almost like you all, hard work, financial aid, eligibility determination for that program. The one thing I wanted to cover with Passport is that it's the second bullet here, that we did get some funding for this next year to do a Passport program study. So the idea here is to really understand whether or not Passport is working as it was intended to, or where we might have some opportunity for improvement. These next slides, again, when you get a copy here, is just about, like, you could take a look at how many students are served and kind of the funding there. The one piece that I wanted to talk about with National Guard grant is that for students and for their kind of experience with the program, we have implemented, after reviewing kind of the last couple of years in the program, a priority consideration date for student applicants. Notice that I don't say deadline, but this is really intended to make sure that students know that it takes time to process their application. The National Guard's involved. You all have to certify their eligibility. And so we know that in the past, students have kind of like submitted their application like 2 days before the quarter starts and then wanted to know where their funding is. So we're just working on kind of expectations and making sure there's really clear communication about when those applications should be in. WAVE, we are currently working with the Workforce and Training Board. I believe that the WAVE applicants are being potentially notified today, those that have been awarded, if not over the next couple days. And I think there's going to be something like 106 that have been awarded. In terms of the educator workforce programs, thank you so much for all of your certifications of eligibility there. Just wanted to point out, and the data will be in the slides, that we continue to see a much higher demand than we can currently fund in these programs, but it's really important to understand what the demand is. So thanks for your support in promoting those programs and the applicants. State Work Study will have its own session in June, but just in general, flat funding here, colleges are definitely indicating that they're having some struggles with spending all of their allotments. And so really want to think about what that looks like for students, or what it might look like in terms of WASAC supporting the development of positions. And then of course there's been a lot of development on the portal with State Work Study. The only other thing I'm going to cover, because I know that we're here at the end of time, is just that the renewal process is coming up for your state participation. And so, oops, did I go too far? So what we're going to be asking for you all, because we're at our 5-year renewal mark, is that you submit repayment repayment policies and institutional budgets. I don't have time to really go into detail about that, but no, here, take a look at pictures of our not brand new in some cases, but fairly new team members we're adding to our team, and just really excited about the experience that they bring to the team. As a reminder, the best way to contact our office is using program mailboxes. They are monitored by multiple staff throughout the day. We've answered questions as we go along. We are so grateful for your work, your partnership, and we ask that you really complete a survey evaluation of the time that we've spent together. And then also put on your calendar, we're going to put this out in email, but we will be doing some more webinars on June 20th and June 22nd. So we hope that you can join us then. But in the meantime, always know that you can reach out with your questions, your feedback, your ideas. That's how we do the work is together. So sorry to go a minute over, but grateful for your time today. And thanks for all of the work. And in the survey, if I go back to that, you can also give us any kind of comments that you have about like trainings that you would like to see in the future. And also know that you can request a college direct, like a custom training for your campus as well. So thanks everybody. That is all the time we have today, but reach out as needed.